The radio crackled with static as the SEAL team leader's voice cut through. VIPER-1, we need immediate close air support on multiple hardened positions. How copy? Captain Sarah Chen's F/A-18E Super Hornet banked hard over the Afghan mountains, her targeting systems already painting 3 separate anti-aircraft installations that had the ground team pinned down in a narrow valley with no escape route. What happened next would become legend among Special Operations Forces, a single combat run that cleared an entire valley of threats in under 90 seconds, executed with surgical precision that left even veteran SEALs speechless. The pre-dawn darkness hung over Bagram airfield like a heavy blanket, broken only by the intermittent flash of runway lights cutting through the Afghan winter morning. Captain Sarah Chen moved across the flight line with practiced silence, her combat boots making soft contact with the frost-covered tarmac. The air bit at her exposed skin, with temperatures hovering near freezing, but she felt nothing except the familiar weight of her helmet under her left arm and the steady rhythm of her breathing creating small clouds in the frigid air. Her F/A-18E Super Hornet sat in its hardened shelter, a gray predator waiting in the shadows. Ground crew members moved around the aircraft like silent ghosts, performing final systems checks and ordnance verification. Sarah approached her jet with the same deliberate pace she had maintained for the past 6 years of combat deployments. No rushing, no wasted motion, just the smooth execution of procedures that had been drilled into her reflexes until they became second nature. The smell of jet fuel mixed with the clean mountain air, a combination that had become as familiar to her as morning coffee. She completed her visual inspection of the aircraft, running her gloved hands along the leading edges of the wings, checking for any ice formation that might affect aerodynamics. The external fuel tanks were topped off, and she could see the distinctive shapes of precision-guided munitions mounted beneath the fuselage. 4 GBU-12 paveway laser-guided bombs, each weighing 500 pounds, along with her full complement of 20mm cannon ammunition. Sarah's pre-flight routine was methodical and thorough. She checked every external surface, every panel, every antenna. Her fingers traced along the missile rails, ensuring proper alignment and secure mounting. The targeting pod underneath the nose cone showed no signs of damage or interference. Everything was exactly as it should be, but she knew that attention to these details often meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The crew chief approached with his clipboard, vapor streaming from his mouth as he spoke. All systems green, Captain. Ordnance is live and verified. Weather update shows clear skies over the target area, winds light and variable. Sarah nodded, taking the clipboard to review the final maintenance log entries. No discrepancies, no deferred maintenance items, no concerns that would compromise her mission capability. She climbed the ladder to the cockpit with fluid movements, settling into the ejection seat that had been adjusted to her exact specifications. The cockpit wrapped around her like a familiar embrace, every switch and display positioned within easy reach. Sarah began the startup sequence, her hands moving across the instrument panel with the precision of a concert pianist playing a well-rehearsed piece. The first engine spooled up with a rising whine that gradually deepened into the steady roar of military power. Hydraulic systems came online with subtle vibrations she could feel through the airframe. The heads-up display illuminated with a cascade of green symbology, showing aircraft status, navigation information, and weapon system readiness. Her multi-function displays flickered to life, presenting a digital representation of the world around her aircraft. The tower frequency crackled in her headset as air traffic control began coordinating her departure. Other aircraft were moving on the taxiways, their navigation lights creating moving constellations in the darkness. Sarah listened to the controlled chaos of military aviation operations, waiting for her turn in the carefully orchestrated ballet of combat aircraft launching into the night. Her mission briefing had been straightforward but sobering. A 12-man SEAL team had been inserted into a remote valley in eastern Afghanistan, tasked with capturing a high-value target suspected of coordinating attacks against coalition forces. Intelligence reports indicated the compound was lightly defended, with minimal anti-aircraft threats in the immediate area. The SEALs expected a quick insertion, fast completion of their objective, and immediate extraction. But intelligence reports, Sarah knew from experience, were often incomplete or outdated. The enemy had a disturbing tendency to adapt and reinforce their positions between the time intelligence was gathered and missions were executed. She had learned to prepare for the unexpected, to maintain flexibility in her planning, and to never underestimate the resourcefulness of her adversaries. The radio check with her tactical air control party confirmed that ground forces were approximately 30 minutes from their insertion point. Sarah would maintain a patrol orbit at medium altitude, ready to provide close air support if requested. Her fuel load would give her nearly 3 hours of loiter time, more than sufficient to cover the expected duration of the ground operation. As she taxied toward the active runway, Sarah's mind automatically reviewed the standard engagement procedures for close air support missions. Positive identification of targets, confirmation of friendly force locations, authorization from the ground commander, and strict adherence to rules of engagement that protected civilian populations. Every trigger pull had to be justified. Every bomb drop had to serve a legitimate military purpose. The runway stretched out before her like a black ribbon disappearing into the darkness. Tower cleared her for takeoff, and Sarah advanced the throttles to military power. The Super Hornet responded instantly, accelerating down the runway with the smooth power of twin turbofan engines producing over 40,000 pounds of thrust. The nose wheel lifted off at precisely the calculated rotation speed, and she felt the familiar sensation of the aircraft transitioning from a ground vehicle to a flying machine. Climbing through the thin mountain air, Sarah established her patrol orbit over the designated area. The landscape below appeared as a patchwork of shadows and subtle variations in darkness, occasionally illuminated by the pale light of a quarter moon. Her radar painted a picture of the surrounding airspace, showing the positions of other coalition aircraft operating in the region. Everything appeared routine, exactly as planned. The first hour of her patrol passed without incident. Sarah maintained her altitude and airspeed, periodically checking her fuel consumption and weapon system status. The SEAL team reported normal progress toward their objective, with no enemy contact and no requests for air support. The night seemed peaceful, almost deceptively quiet. It was during her second hour on station that the calm was shattered. The radio erupted with urgent voices, overlapping transmissions, and the unmistakable sound of automatic weapons fire in the background. The SEAL team leader's voice cut through the chaos with professional clarity, but Sarah could hear the tension beneath his controlled tone. VIPER-1, Viper 1, this is Groundhog 6. We are taking effective fire from multiple positions. Enemy has prepared positions with interlocking fields of fire. We are pinned down and cannot maneuver. Request immediate close air support. Over. Sarah's hands moved instinctively to her weapon control systems, bringing targeting sensors online and preparing for immediate engagement. Groundhog 6, VIPER-1 copies. I am inbound to your position. Transmit your coordinates and mark friendly positions with infrared strobes. The situation on the ground was deteriorating rapidly. Through her targeting pod, Sarah could see the muzzle flashes of enemy weapons and the infrared signatures of the SEAL team members huddled behind inadequate cover. The valley was a natural killing ground, with steep sides that channeled movement and provided excellent defensive positions for enemy forces. What the intelligence briefing had failed to mention was that the compound had been reinforced with a sophisticated air defense network. As Sarah descended to begin her attack run, her radar warning receiver began screaming alerts. Surface-to-air missile sites were painting her aircraft with targeting radars, and she could see the distinctive heat signatures of man-portable air defense systems being moved into firing positions. The enemy had anticipated coalition air support and had prepared accordingly. This was not a lightly defended compound, but a carefully planned ambush designed to destroy both the ground forces and any aircraft that came to their assistance. Sarah found herself flying into a trap that could easily claim her life and leave the SEAL team without hope of survival or extraction. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Sarah's breathing remained steady as her threat warning system painted an increasingly complex picture of the valley below. 3 distinct surface-to-air missile sites had acquired her aircraft, their radar signatures creating overlapping engagement zones that would be nearly impossible to penetrate using conventional tactics. The enemy had positioned their defenses with tactical sophistication that spoke of professional military training rather than improvised insurgent operations. Her first instinct was to climb to a safer altitude and request additional air support, but the voices from the ground told a different story. The SEAL team was taking casualties. their ammunition running low, and their position becoming more precarious with each passing minute. Waiting for reinforcements was not an option when American lives hung in the balance. Sarah had earned her reputation through 5 previous combat deployments, flying over 200 combat missions across Iraq and Afghanistan. She had seen ground forces in desperate situations before and understood the split-second decisions that separated successful missions from tragic failures. Her squadron commander had once told her that exceptional pilots were defined not by their ability to follow standard procedures, but by their capacity to adapt those procedures to impossible circumstances. The daughter of a Marine Corps infantry officer, Sarah, had grown up hearing stories of combat leadership and the bonds forged between those who served together in dangerous places. Her father had taught her that military service was about more than personal achievement or professional advancement. It was about the sacred trust between those who wore the uniform, the unspoken promise that no one would be abandoned when the situation became desperate. Her own path to naval aviation had been unconventional. While many of her peers had dreamed of flying since childhood, Sarah had initially planned to become a physician, inspired by a desire to heal rather than destroy. It was during her pre-medical studies at the Naval Academy that she had discovered an aptitude for three-dimensional thinking and rapid decision-making that made her a natural pilot candidate. The transition from healing to warfare had not been easy, but Sarah had found purpose in the precision required for close air support missions. Every bomb she dropped, every cannon round she fired was calculated to protect friendly forces and minimize collateral damage. She viewed her aircraft not as an instrument of destruction, but as a tool for protecting those who could not protect themselves. Her tactical training had emphasized the importance of situational awareness and flexible thinking. Standard close air support doctrine called for systematic target identification, careful coordination with ground forces, and methodical engagement of enemy positions. But the current situation demanded something different, something that would require her to push beyond the boundaries of conventional tactics. Sarah's hands moved across her cockpit controls with practiced efficiency, reconfiguring her aircraft systems for low-altitude operations. She disabled her radar to reduce her electronic signature and switched to passive navigation modes that would make her more difficult to track. Her heads-up display showed the precise locations of the enemy air defense sites, information that would normally cause any rational pilot to request permission to abort the mission. Instead, Sarah began calculating attack angles and timing sequences that would allow her to neutralize all 3 sites before they could engage her aircraft effectively. The mathematics were complex, requiring her to account for weapon flight times, target acquisition delays, and the precise choreography of a high-speed attack run through heavily defended airspace. Her targeting pod provided detailed imagery of the valley floor, revealing the sophisticated nature of the enemy positions. The first site was a Russian-made SA-7 system concealed beneath camouflage netting, its operators clearly visible through thermal imaging. The second site appeared to be a more modern system, possibly Iranian-supplied, positioned on a rocky outcropping that provided excellent fields of fire. The third site was partially hidden in a cave mouth, making it the most challenging target to engage effectively. The SEAL team's position was marked by infrared strobes invisible to the naked eye but clearly visible through her night vision systems. They had established a defensive perimeter in a shallow depression that provided minimal protection from the enemy's elevated firing positions. Sarah could see that their options for movement were severely limited, with enemy forces controlling all the high ground surrounding their location. Ground fire was intensifying, with automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenades creating a deadly crossfire that prevented any attempt at tactical movement. The team medic was working on at least 2 wounded operators, their heat signatures showing the distinctive patterns of significant blood loss. Time was running out, and conventional close air support procedures would take too long to coordinate and execute. Sarah made a decision that would have been considered reckless by any objective observer but represented the kind of calculated risk that defines special operations warfare. Rather than engaging the targets sequentially, which would give the surviving sites time to track and engage her aircraft, she would attempt to neutralize all 3 positions in a single pass, using a combination of precision weapons and gun runs. The plan required her to descend to an altitude that would make her vulnerable to small arms fire, while simultaneously engaging 3 separate targets with different weapon systems. Her first target would be the cave-mounted system, which she would engage with a laser-guided bomb dropped at maximum range. Her second target would be the ridge-mounted system, which she would destroy with cannon fire during a high-speed pass. Her final target would be the camouflage system, which she would engage with another precision weapon while climbing away from the valley floor. The timing would be critical, with margins for error measured in seconds rather than minutes. Any deviation from her planned flight path would likely result in her being shot down, leaving the SEAL team without air support and facing certain death or capture. Success would require perfect execution of a maneuver that existed nowhere in official tactical doctrine. Sarah's instructor at the Navy's elite tube gun school had taught her that exceptional pilots were those who could visualize complex three-dimensional problems and execute solutions under extreme pressure. The ability to think ahead of the aircraft, to anticipate the consequences of each control input, was what separated competent pilots from those who achieved legendary status within the aviation community. Her pre-flight planning had included detailed study of the valley's terrain features, wind patterns, and potential escape routes. She had memorized the locations of every ridgeline, every depression, every feature that might provide concealment or protection. This preparation now proved invaluable as she began her descent toward the valley floor. The Super Hornet responded to her control inputs with the precision of a finely tuned instrument, its fly-by-wire flight control system translating her intentions into precise aircraft movements. Sarah could feel the subtle changes in air pressure and turbulence as she descended through different altitude layers, her aircraft's sensors automatically adjusting for the changing atmospheric conditions. Her weapon systems were armed and ready, with target coordinates already programmed into her precision-guided munitions. The laser designator was painting the cave entrance with invisible energy, providing terminal guidance for her first bomb. Her cannon was loaded with armor-piercing incendiary rounds capable of destroying light armored vehicles and fortified positions. The valley walls rose around her aircraft like the sides of a canyon, their steep slopes creating a natural funnel that would concentrate enemy fire along her flight path. Sarah's radar warning receiver was silent, indicating that the enemy systems had not yet acquired her aircraft, but she knew that would change the moment she began her attack run. Her heart rate remained steady at 68 beats per minute, the same resting rate she had maintained throughout her career. Physical fitness and mental conditioning had trained her body to perform optimally under stress, allowing her to think clearly and react quickly when others might be overwhelmed by the intensity of combat operations. The infrared strobes marking friendly positions grew brighter as she approached the valley floor, their steady pulsing providing constant confirmation of the SEAL team's location. Sarah could see individual team members through her targeting system, their prone positions and tactical spacing indicating professional training and discipline, even under extreme duress. Enemy muzzle flashes were clearly visible throughout the valley, creating a deadly light show that illuminated the scope of the threat facing the ground forces. Sarah counted at least 15 separate firing positions, suggesting that the enemy force was significantly larger than intelligence estimates had indicated. The ambush had been carefully planned and expertly executed, designed to eliminate the entire SEAL team and any aircraft that attempted to provide support. Sarah's aircraft was now committed to the attack run, flying too low and too fast to abort without exposing herself to catastrophic ground fire. Her training and experience had prepared her for this moment, but nothing could eliminate the inherent risks of single aircraft operations against heavily defended targets. The success or failure of the mission now depended entirely on her ability to execute a nearly impossible tactical maneuver with perfect precision while under fire from multiple enemy positions. The margin for error was essentially zero, and the consequences of failure would be measured in American lives lost in a remote Afghan valley. The mission parameters crystallized in Sarah's mind as she processed the tactical intelligence flowing through her aircraft's data systems. Operation Nightfall had begun as a straightforward high-value target capture, with SEAL Team Bravo tasked to extract a Taliban commander responsible for coordinating improvised explosive device networks across 3 Afghan provinces. The target, known by the codename Blackwater, had been tracked to a compound in the Korangal Valley through signals intelligence and human sources developed over months of patient intelligence gathering. Sarah's role in the operation had been defined as standard combat air patrol, maintaining overwatch while the ground forces completed their mission. Her fuel load had been calculated for a 3-hour loiter period, with sufficient ordnance to engage light defensive positions if necessary. The intelligence briefing had characterized the threat level as moderate, with possible small arms resistance but no significant anti-aircraft capabilities expected in the target area. The insertion had proceeded flawlessly, with the SEAL team fast roping from MH-60 Blackhawks into a landing zone 2 kilometers from the target compound. Radio communications had remained clear and routine as the operators moved through the rocky terrain under cover of darkness. Their approach had been methodical and professional, utilizing terrain features to mask their movement while maintaining tactical spacing that would allow them to respond effectively to any enemy contact. Weather conditions were optimal for the mission, with clear skies providing excellent visibility for both navigation and target identification. The quarter moon provided sufficient ambient light for night vision operations, while avoiding the complete darkness that might have favored defending forces. Wind conditions were calm, with only light mountain breezes that would not significantly affect aircraft handling or weapon accuracy. Sarah's aircraft systems had been performing flawlessly throughout the patrol period. Her engines were operating within normal parameters, fuel consumption was tracking precisely with pre-flight calculations, and all weapon systems had passed their periodic built-in tests. The Super Hornet was responding to her control inputs with the crisp precision that made it one of the most capable multi-role fighters in the world. The valley geography presented both advantages and challenges for air support operations. The narrow confines provided excellent target definition and reduced the possibility of engaging friendly forces by mistake. However, the steep terrain also limited maneuvering options and created natural corridors that enemy forces could use to concentrate their defensive fire. Sarah had studied the topographical maps extensively during her mission planning, identifying potential attack routes and escape vectors for various tactical scenarios. Her communication equipment was configured for multiple frequency monitoring, allowing her to maintain contact with the SEAL team, air traffic control, and the Tactical Operations Center simultaneously. The encrypted radio systems provided secure communications that could not be intercepted by enemy forces, ensuring that tactical coordination could proceed without compromise. Her aircraft's identification friend or foe system was broadcasting the proper codes to prevent engagement by friendly air defense systems. The rules of engagement for the mission were clearly defined and thoroughly briefed. Sarah was authorized to engage any target that posed an immediate threat to friendly forces, but she was required to obtain positive target identification before releasing weapons. Collateral damage estimates had to be minimized, particularly in areas where civilian populations might be present. Every engagement decision required careful consideration of proportionality and military necessity. Her targeting pod had been calibrated and tested before departure, providing high-resolution imagery that would allow precise target identification and weapon guidance. The laser designator was functioning properly, capable of painting targets with invisible infrared energy that would guide precision munitions to their intended impact points. Her radar systems were operating in low probability of intercept modes that would make detection by enemy forces extremely difficult. The initial phases of the ground operation had proceeded according to plan. The SEAL team had established an overwatch position within sight of the target compound, conducting detailed surveillance to confirm the presence of their objective and identify potential threats. Their reconnaissance had revealed a larger enemy presence than anticipated, but nothing that appeared beyond their capabilities to handle was standard small unit tactics. Sarah had maintained her patrol orbit at 15,000 feet, high enough to avoid most ground-based threats, while remaining within immediate response range if air support was requested. Her position provided excellent visibility over the entire valley, allowing her to monitor the tactical situation and respond quickly to any changes in the operational environment. The altitude also optimized her fuel consumption, extending her available loiter time and maintaining maximum flexibility for mission completion. The compound itself was a typical Afghan rural structure, consisting of multiple buildings surrounded by a high wall that provided both privacy and defensive capability. Intelligence reports indicated that the buildings were used for both residential and operational purposes, with family members of the target likely present, along with armed guards and operational personnel. This mixed occupancy required the SEAL team to exercise extreme care in their approach and assault planning. Thermal imaging from Sarah's targeting pod had revealed approximately 15 heat signatures within the compound, consistent with intelligence estimates of the target's security detail and family members. The signatures showed normal patterns of activity with no indication that the occupants were aware of the approaching American forces. Guard positions appeared to be routine rather than heightened, suggesting that operational security had been maintained throughout the insertion and approach phases. The assault plan called for the SEAL team to breach the compound wall at 2 points simultaneously, creating confusion and preventing organized resistance. Half the team would secure the main building where the target was believed to be located, while the other half would clear secondary structures and establish perimeter security. The operation was expected to be completed within 20 minutes, allowing for immediate extraction before enemy reinforcements could arrive. Sarah's fuel consumption calculations showed adequate reserves for the planned mission duration, with sufficient margin to account for potential delays or complications. Her weapon load included both precision-guided munitions for hardened targets and cannon ammunition for engaging personnel or lightly armored vehicles. The combination provided flexibility to respond to a wide range of potential threats without requiring immediate resupply or additional air support. The tactical air control party attached to the SEAL team was equipped with laser target designators compatible with Sarah's weapon systems, allowing for rapid target handoff if close air support became necessary. The operators were experienced in coordinating air-ground operations, with extensive training in target identification procedures and collateral damage mitigation techniques. Their presence ensured that any air support requests would be executed with maximum precision and minimum risk to friendly forces. Communication protocols had been established for various contingencies, including emergency extraction procedures if the ground force encountered overwhelming resistance. Sarah's aircraft was equipped with both voice and data link capabilities, allowing for rapid information exchange and coordinated tactical response. Her position in the air provided an elevated perspective that could prove invaluable for tactical decision-making if the situation on the ground became complex. The enemy force structure in the region was known to include Taliban fighters with varying levels of training and equipment. Most were local insurgents with basic small arms and limited tactical capabilities, but intelligence reports had identified the possible presence of foreign fighters with more sophisticated weapons and training. This mixed threat environment required constant vigilance and the ability to rapidly adapt tactics based on actual enemy capabilities encountered during the operation. Sarah's combat experience had taught her to expect the unexpected, particularly in Afghanistan, where enemy forces had demonstrated remarkable adaptability and tactical innovation. Her previous deployments had involved numerous close air support missions, each presenting unique challenges that required creative solutions and precise execution. She had learned to trust her training while remaining flexible enough to adapt to rapidly changing tactical situations. The mission timeline showed the SEAL team approaching their final assault positions, with the compound breach scheduled to commence within 10 minutes. Sarah adjusted her patrol orbit to optimize her response time, while maintaining sufficient altitude to avoid detection by enemy forces. Her weapon systems remained armed and ready, but she hoped that the ground force would be able to complete their mission without requiring air support. Intelligence updates continued to flow through her aircraft's communication systems, providing real-time assessment of enemy activity in the broader area of operations. No significant changes had been detected, and all indicators suggested that the mission was proceeding without compromise. The tactical situation appeared stable, with all elements positioned for successful mission completion according to the original plan. Sarah's training as a naval aviator had emphasized the importance of thorough preparation and contingency planning. Every mission required detailed analysis of potential complications and development of alternative courses of action that could be implemented if circumstances changed. Her mental rehearsal of various scenarios had prepared her to respond effectively to almost any tactical situation that might develop during the operation. The precision required for close air support operations demanded absolute attention to detail and unwavering focus on mission objectives. Sarah understood that her decisions in the coming minutes could determine the success or failure of the entire operation, and potentially the lives of 12 American Special Operations personnel, who depended on her professional competence and tactical expertise. Sarah's tactical assessment began the moment her targeting sensors detected the first anomalous heat signature in the valley below. Her training had taught her to approach every combat situation with methodical analysis, breaking down complex tactical problems into manageable components that could be addressed systematically. The initial radio call from the SEAL team had indicated enemy contact, but the full scope of the threat was only beginning to emerge through her aircraft's sophisticated sensor suite. Her first priority was establishing precise friendly force locations to prevent any possibility of fratricide during subsequent airstrikes. The infrared strobes carried by each SEAL team member created distinctive patterns that were clearly visible through her night vision systems, but Sarah needed to confirm that all 12 operators were accounted for and properly marked. Her targeting pod's high-resolution imagery revealed that the team had established a defensive perimeter in a natural depression, approximately 200 meters from their original assault position. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. What had begun as a routine compound assault had transformed into a complex ambush that suggested sophisticated enemy planning and preparation. Sarah's analysis of the enemy firing positions revealed a level of tactical coordination that exceeded typical Taliban capabilities, indicating the possible presence of foreign advisors or professional military personnel within the defending force. Her electronic warfare systems were detecting multiple radar emissions from the valley floor, signatures that had not been present during her earlier orbital reconnaissance. The enemy had activated sophisticated air defense systems only after the ground assault commenced, demonstrating operational discipline that spoke to advanced training and professional leadership. This was not a hastily organized defensive response, but a carefully orchestrated trap designed to eliminate both the ground force and any supporting aircraft. The terrain analysis displayed on Sarah's multi-function displays showed the tactical disadvantages facing the SEAL team. Their current position offered minimal cover from the elevated enemy firing positions that dominated the surrounding high ground. Natural escape routes were limited by steep terrain features that would channel any movement attempt into predetermined killing zones. The enemy had selected their ambush site with tactical precision that maximized their advantages while minimizing American options for maneuver or withdrawal. Sarah's threat assessment identified 3 distinct categories of enemy weapons systems. The first category consisted of small arms and light machine guns positioned in prepared fighting positions throughout the valley. These weapons posed a direct threat to the SEAL team, but were relatively ineffective against her aircraft at higher altitudes. The second category included rocket-propelled grenades and recoilless rifles that could engage both ground and air targets within their effective range. The third category comprised the surface-to-air missile systems that were specifically designed to destroy aircraft attempting to provide close air support. Her radar warning receiver was painting an increasingly complex picture of the air defense threat. The first system appeared to be a shoulder-fired missile with infrared guidance, capable of engaging aircraft at low to medium altitudes. The second system showed characteristics consistent with a radar-guided missile with a longer engagement range and higher probability of kill against fast-moving targets. The third system was partially masked by terrain features, making definitive identification difficult, but its electronic signature suggested capabilities that exceeded anything previously encountered in the area of operations. The timing of the ambush revealed careful enemy intelligence gathering and operational planning. The attacking force had waited until the SEAL team was fully committed to their assault before revealing their positions and initiating contact. This tactical patience demonstrated professional military training and suggested that the enemy had been tracking American special operations patterns and developing countermeasures specifically designed to exploit standard operating procedures. Sarah's fuel calculations showed sufficient reserves for extended combat operations, but her ordnance load would limit her engagement options once committed to the attack. Her 4 precision-guided bombs were ideally suited for destroying hardened targets but would require careful target selection to maximize their tactical impact. Her cannon ammunition provided greater flexibility for engaging multiple targets but would require her to operate at lower altitudes where she would be vulnerable to enemy air defense systems. The communication intercepts her aircraft's electronic intelligence systems were collecting revealed that the enemy force was significantly larger than initial estimates had suggested. Radio traffic indicated the presence of at least 30 fighters distributed throughout the valley, with additional reserves positioned outside the immediate engagement area. The defending force had established multiple command and control nodes that were coordinating their defensive fires and managing their air defense assets with tactical sophistication that surprised even experienced special operations personnel. Her mission analysis identified several potential courses of action, each with distinct advantages and disadvantages. The first option involved engaging the enemy positions sequentially, using precision weapons to systematically destroy each threat while maintaining maximum altitude and standoff distance. This approach would minimize her aircraft's exposure to enemy fire, but would require extended time over the target area and might not provide sufficient support to prevent SEAL team casualties. The second option called for coordinated strikes against multiple targets using a combination of precision weapons and cannon fire This approach would provide more immediate relief to the ground forces, but would require her to operate at lower altitudes where enemy air defense systems could engage her aircraft effectively. The tactical risk was significant, but the potential for rapid mission success was correspondingly higher. The third option involved requesting additional air support assets to conduct a coordinated attack that would overwhelm enemy defenses through simultaneous engagements from multiple directions. This approach would provide the highest probability of mission success with minimum risk to her aircraft, but the time required to coordinate multiple aircraft would likely result in SEAL team casualties that could be prevented through immediate action. Sarah's analysis of enemy defensive positions revealed patterns that suggested professional military engineering. The fighting positions were mutually supporting, with overlapping fields of fire that would make individual target engagement extremely difficult. The air defense systems were positioned to provide layered coverage that would force attacking aircraft to penetrate multiple engagement zones before reaching their intended targets. The overall defensive scheme demonstrated tactical competence that exceeded anything typically encountered during routine operations. Her targeting priorities required careful consideration of both immediate threats to friendly forces and longer-term tactical implications. The surface-to-air missile systems posed the greatest threat to her aircraft, but were not directly engaging the SEAL team. The small arms and crew-served weapons were causing immediate casualties among the ground forces but presented minimal threat to her aircraft at altitude. The optimal target engagement sequence would need to balance aircraft survivability with ground force protection requirements. The tactical intelligence picture was complicated by the presence of potential civilian populations in the surrounding area. Her rules of engagement required positive identification of military targets and careful consideration of collateral damage estimates before weapon release. The enemy's integration of defensive positions with civilian structures created targeting challenges that would require precise weapon employment and detailed battle damage assessment to ensure compliance with international humanitarian law. Sarah's combat experience had taught her that complex tactical situations often required innovative solutions that extended beyond standard operating procedures. Her training at the Navy's Strike Fighter Tactics Instructor Program had emphasized the importance of creative thinking and tactical flexibility when confronting unusual or unexpected enemy capabilities. The current situation clearly fell into that category, requiring tactical innovation that would push the boundaries of conventional close air support doctrine. Her aircraft's sensor systems were providing continuous updates on enemy activity and friendly force status. The SEAL team's casualties were mounting, with at least 3 operators requiring immediate medical attention and evacuation. Their ammunition supplies were diminishing rapidly under the intensity of enemy fire, and their tactical options were becoming increasingly limited as enemy forces maneuvered to tighten the encirclement. The weather conditions remained favorable for precision attack operations, with clear visibility and minimal wind that would not significantly affect weapon accuracy. However, the approaching dawn would eliminate the night vision advantages that American forces typically enjoyed, potentially shifting the tactical balance in favor of the defending enemy forces. Time was becoming a critical factor that would influence all subsequent tactical decisions. Sarah's threat prioritization matrix identified the cave-mounted air defense system as her primary concern due to its protected position and sophisticated capabilities. The ridge-mounted system represented her secondary priority because of its commanding field of fire and ability to engage aircraft throughout their attack profiles. The camouflage system was her tertiary concern, but its mobility and concealment made it potentially the most dangerous threat if not neutralized quickly and decisively. Her weapon employment planning required precise calculation of attack geometries, target acquisition timelines, and escape route options that would allow her to engage all priority targets while minimizing her aircraft's exposure to enemy fire. The mathematical complexity of the problem was enormous, requiring her to consider dozens of variables simultaneously while operating under extreme time pressure and combat stress that would challenge even the most experienced military aviators. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Sarah's first engagement unfolded with the calculated precision of a surgeon's scalpel cutting through diseased tissue. She rolled her Super Hornet into a steep dive, the aircraft's nose pointing toward the cave entrance where the most sophisticated air defense system lay concealed behind carefully positioned camouflage netting. Her targeting pod had locked onto the thermal signature of the missile launcher's cooling system, a faint heat bloom that betrayed the position despite the enemy's attempts at concealment. The descent was controlled and deliberate, her airspeed building as gravity and engine thrust combined to drive the aircraft through the thin mountain air. Her hands remained steady on the controls, making minute adjustments to maintain the precise attack angle required for optimal weapon employment. The laser designator painted the target with invisible infrared energy, providing terminal guidance for the 500-pound GBU-12 paveway bomb that hung beneath her aircraft's centerline station. At precisely the calculated release point, Sarah pressed the weapon release button with her right thumb. The bomb separated from its mounting pylon with a barely perceptible thud, its fins deploying automatically as internal guidance systems took control of the weapon's flight path. The laser-guided munition began its own descent toward the cave entrance, following the invisible beam that Sarah's targeting pod was painting on the rocky outcropping where enemy forces had positioned their most dangerous asset. Her aircraft immediately began a climbing turn to the left, trading altitude for airspeed as she maneuvered to avoid the blast effects of her own weapon. The Super Hornet's fly-by-wire flight control system responded instantly to her control inputs, the aircraft's computer-controlled surfaces adjusting automatically to maintain optimal flight characteristics despite the sudden change in weight distribution caused by the weapon release. The explosion echoed through the valley like thunder, a brilliant flash of light that temporarily overwhelmed her night vision systems before automatic filters compensated for the sudden illumination. Secondary explosions followed as the enemy's stored missiles and fuel detonated in a cascading chain reaction that sent chunks of rock and metal debris arcing high into the air. The cave entrance collapsed entirely, sealing whatever remained of the air defense system beneath tons of fractured stone. But Sarah's celebration was premature. Her radar warning receiver suddenly erupted with new threat indicators as the remaining two air defense systems came fully online, their operators apparently having waited for her to reveal her position through offensive action. The electronic warfare displays in her cockpit painted an increasingly complex picture of overlapping engagement zones and tracking radars that were attempting to establish firing solutions on her aircraft. The ridge-mounted system was the first to achieve a solid lock, its radar beam painting her aircraft with electromagnetic energy that would guide an incoming missile to its target. Sarah's threat assessment indicated that the system was likely a more modern design than intelligence had suggested, possibly Iranian-supplied equipment that had been infiltrated through Pakistani smuggling networks that operated along the remote border regions. Her immediate response was a violent defensive maneuver that combined rapid altitude changes with chaff deployment designed to break the enemy's radar lock. The Super Hornet rolled into a steep diving turn that brought her dangerously close to the valley floor, her altimeter showing less than 500 feet above the rocky terrain that could prove fatal if she misjudged her aircraft's performance capabilities. The chaff bloomed behind her aircraft like metallic snow, thousands of aluminum strips that created false radar returns designed to confuse enemy targeting systems. Her electronic countermeasures suite activated automatically, broadcasting jamming signals across multiple frequency bands in an attempt to disrupt the guidance systems of any missiles that might already be in flight toward her position. Through her peripheral vision, Sarah caught sight of a missile trail rising from the ridge position, a thin white contrail that marked the path of a surface-to-air missile accelerating toward an intercept course with her aircraft. The weapon appeared to be a shoulder-fired system with infrared guidance, seeking the heat signature of her engines rather than relying on radar guidance that could be jammed or deceived through electronic countermeasures. Her response was immediate and instinctive, a combination of defensive maneuvering and countermeasure deployment that represented the culmination of thousands of hours of training and combat experience. She rolled the aircraft into a series of rapid barrel rolls while simultaneously deploying flares designed to create false heat sources that might attract the missile away from her engines. The flares ignited in sequence behind her aircraft, each one burning at temperatures that exceeded her engine exhaust signature and creating multiple heat sources that would confuse the missile's guidance system. Her maneuvers were precise and calculated, designed to maximize the effectiveness of her countermeasures while maintaining sufficient energy to continue her attack mission against the remaining enemy positions. The missile passed harmlessly through the flare pattern, its guidance system apparently unable to distinguish between her aircraft and the decoy heat sources. The weapon detonated at a safe distance, its fragmentation pattern dissipating harmlessly in the thin mountain air. Sarah had successfully defeated the first missile engagement, but she knew that the enemy would quickly reload and attempt another shot. Her tactical situation was becoming increasingly complex as the remaining air defense systems adapted their tactics to account for her countermeasures and defensive capabilities. The camouflage system near the valley floor had repositioned itself to a new location, making target identification extremely difficult through the combination of natural terrain features and artificial concealment materials. The SEAL team's situation was deteriorating rapidly during her engagement with the air defense systems. Enemy small arms fire was intensifying from multiple directions as additional fighters moved into position to tighten the encirclement around the American Special Operations personnel. Her targeting pod showed muzzle flashes from at least 20 different positions, indicating that the enemy force was significantly larger than initial intelligence estimates had suggested. Radio communications from the ground were becoming increasingly urgent as the team leader reported multiple casualties and dwindling ammunition supplies. The tactical air controller attached to the SEAL team was requesting immediate close air support against the infantry positions that were preparing to overrun the American defensive perimeter. The situation required immediate action to prevent a tactical disaster that could result in the loss of the entire team. Sarah's fuel consumption during her defensive maneuvering had been higher than planned, reducing her available loiter time and limiting her options for extended combat operations. Her remaining ordnance consisted of 3 precision-guided bombs and her full load of 20mm cannon ammunition, weapons that would need to be employed with maximum efficiency to achieve the tactical effects required to save the ground forces. Her next target was the ridge-mounted air defense system that had nearly succeeded in shooting down her aircraft. The position was located on a rocky outcropping that provided excellent visibility over the entire valley, but also made it vulnerable to direct attack from aircraft operating at specific angles of approach. Sarah began calculating the precise flight path that would allow her to engage the target, while minimizing her exposure to defensive fire from the remaining enemy positions. The attack would require her to approach the target from a direction that would mask her aircraft behind terrain features until the final moments before weapon release. Her timing would need to be perfect, with no margin for error that might allow the enemy system to acquire and engage her aircraft before she could complete her attack. The mathematical precision required was enormous, but Sarah's training and experience had prepared her for exactly this type of complex tactical problem. Her approach began with a wide climbing turn that would position her aircraft for the optimal attack geometry while maintaining sufficient altitude to avoid small arms fire from the infantry positions below. The maneuver required careful energy management to ensure that she would have adequate airspeed for both the attack run and subsequent escape maneuvers that might be necessary if additional threats emerged during the engagement. The ridge-mounted system was tracking her movement, its radar dish rotating to maintain contact as she maneuvered around the valley perimeter. Sarah could see the heat signature of the missile launcher through her targeting pod, a distinctive thermal pattern that confirmed the system's readiness to engage her aircraft. The enemy operators were professional and disciplined, waiting for the optimal firing solution before committing their weapons to the engagement. Her final approach began with a steep diving turn that brought her aircraft down through the defensive engagement zone at maximum speed. The Super Hornet's engines were producing their maximum rated thrust, driving the aircraft through the thin air at speeds that compressed time and space into a narrow window of tactical opportunity. Her targeting systems were locked onto the enemy position, calculating the precise release point for her second precision-guided weapon. The enemy system fired at almost the same moment that Sarah released her bomb, creating a deadly race between her weapon and the missile that was climbing toward her aircraft. Her immediate response was another violent defensive maneuver combined with chaff and flare deployment, but the geometry of the engagement left her with limited maneuvering options that might allow the enemy weapon to achieve a successful intercept. The outcome of this engagement would determine not only her own survival, but also the fate of 12 American Special Operations personnel, who were depending on her ability to neutralize the threats that were preventing their extraction from an increasingly untenable tactical situation. The second explosion shattered the ridgeline with tremendous force, sending fragments of rock and twisted metal cascading down the steep slopes toward the valley floor below. Sarah's precision-guided munition had found its mark despite the enemy's attempt to engage her aircraft simultaneously, the 500-pound warhead detonating precisely at the coordinates she had designated through her laser targeting system. The ridge-mounted air defense system vanished in a brilliant fireball that briefly illuminated the entire valley in stark relief. Yet even as she celebrated this tactical success, Sarah's electronic warfare systems were screaming warnings about threats that intelligence briefings had never mentioned. Her radar warning receiver was detecting emissions from multiple sources scattered throughout the mountainous terrain, signatures that suggested a sophisticated air defense network rather than the isolated missile sites that had been identified during mission planning. The enemy had constructed an integrated defense system designed specifically to counter American close air support operations. Her aircraft shuddered as shrapnel from the ridge explosion peppered her starboard wing, the impacts creating distinctive metallic sounds that resonated through the airframe. Warning lights flickered across her instrument panel as onboard computers assessed the damage and reconfigured flight control systems to compensate for any structural degradation. The Super Hornet's redundant systems were designed to survive combat damage, but accumulated hits could eventually compromise her aircraft's performance or even its ability to remain airborne. The third air defense system had relocated during her engagement with the ridge position, demonstrating tactical mobility that suggested truck-mounted rather than fixed installations. Sarah's targeting pod swept across the valley floor in search of the distinctive heat signature that would betray the system's new position, but the enemy operators had learned from observing her previous attacks and were employing sophisticated camouflage techniques that made detection extremely difficult. Below her, the SEAL team's tactical situation was approaching critical levels as enemy infantry forces pressed their assault from multiple directions simultaneously. The thermal imaging from her targeting pod showed at least 30 fighters moving through prepared positions that had been excavated and fortified over a period of weeks or months. This was not a hasty ambush, but a carefully planned killing zone designed to annihilate American Special Operations Forces and any aircraft that attempted to provide support. Her fuel consumption calculations were becoming increasingly urgent as extended combat maneuvering and maximum thrust operations consumed aviation gasoline at rates that exceeded her mission planning parameters. The Super Hornet's twin engines were designed for efficiency during normal operations, but combat flying demanded performance levels that dramatically increased fuel burn rates. Sarah estimated that she had perhaps 20 minutes of combat operations remaining before fuel considerations would force her to disengage and return to base. The enemy's tactical coordination was becoming more apparent as her electronic intelligence systems intercepted radio communications between various elements of the attacking force. The defending units were using sophisticated frequency-hopping radios that suggested professional military equipment rather than the basic communications gear typically employed by Taliban insurgents. Foreign advisors or special operations personnel were clearly directing the tactical engagement from concealed command positions. Sarah's weapon employment options were becoming increasingly limited as she expended her precision-guided munitions against the air defense systems. Her remaining ordnance consisted of 2 GBU-12 laser-guided bombs and her full complement of 20mm cannon ammunition, weapons that would need to be employed with surgical precision to achieve the tactical effects required to extract the SEAL team from their desperate situation. The canyon's geography was working against her as she attempted to locate the mobile air defense system that posed the greatest remaining threat to her aircraft. The steep terrain created radar shadows and thermal masking that allowed enemy systems to remain concealed until the moment they chose to engage. Her targeting pod's synthetic aperture radar mode was detecting multiple metallic objects that could potentially be military vehicles, but positive identification required visual confirmation that would expose her aircraft to defensive fire. Her next tactical decision would prove crucial to the mission's outcome. She could continue searching for the mobile air defense system while the SEAL team sustained additional casualties, or she could immediately engage the infantry positions that were directly threatening. The ground forces, while accepting the risk that hidden air defense systems might shoot down her aircraft, neither option offered guaranteed success, but delay would certainly result in American deaths. The radio crackled with increasingly desperate communications from the ground forces as their tactical situation deteriorated beyond recovery through conventional means. The team medic was reporting multiple serious casualties that required immediate medical evacuation, but extraction was impossible while enemy forces controlled the surrounding high ground. Their ammunition expenditure was approaching critical levels, with several operators reporting empty magazines and relying on weapons scavenged from enemy casualties. Sarah's analysis of the enemy positions revealed a sophisticated defensive scheme that incorporated mutually supporting fighting positions, predetermined fields of fire, and carefully planned withdrawal routes that would allow surviving fighters to escape if the tactical situation became untenable. The defending force demonstrated tactical competence that exceeded anything typically encountered during routine counterinsurgency operations in Afghanistan. Her targeting priorities required immediate recalculation based on the evolving tactical situation and her diminishing ordnance inventory. The infantry positions posed the most immediate threat to friendly forces, but engaging them would require her to operate at altitudes where the hidden air defense system could potentially achieve a successful intercept. The tactical mathematics were becoming increasingly complex, as multiple variables competed for priority in her decision-making process. The weather was beginning to change as the first hints of dawn appeared along the eastern ridgeline, reducing the effectiveness of thermal imaging systems while improving visibility for enemy fighters equipped with conventional optical sights. The approaching daylight would eliminate many of the technological advantages that American forces typically enjoyed during nighttime operations, potentially shifting the tactical balance in favor of the defending enemy forces. Her aircraft's electronic countermeasures suite was detecting increased enemy electronic warfare activity as sophisticated jamming systems attempted to disrupt her communications and navigation equipment. The enemy was employing techniques that suggested access to current intelligence on American tactical procedures and electronic vulnerabilities. This was not improvised resistance but a carefully orchestrated operation designed by personnel with detailed knowledge of coalition capabilities and limitations. The SEAL team's defensive perimeter was contracting under sustained enemy pressure from multiple directions simultaneously. Their position offered minimal natural cover, and attempts to improve their fighting positions were being frustrated by accurate enemy fire that suppressed any movement. The tactical situation was rapidly approaching the point where extraction would become impossible even with close air support. Sarah's combat experience had taught her that desperate situations often required tactical solutions that exceeded the boundaries of standard operating procedures. Her training at advanced tactical schools had emphasized the importance of creative thinking when confronting unusual or unexpected enemy capabilities. The current situation clearly demanded innovative approaches that would maximize her aircraft's combat effectiveness while minimizing exposure to defensive fire. Her fuel state was becoming a critical factor in all subsequent tactical planning. The extended combat operations had consumed aviation gasoline at rates that would force her to depart the area within 15 minutes, regardless of the tactical situation on the ground. This time constraint added urgency to every decision, while simultaneously limiting her options for complex tactical maneuvers that might require extended loiter time over the target area. The enemy's use of civilian structures and terrain features for military purposes created additional complications for her target engagement procedures. International humanitarian law required her to minimize collateral damage while ensuring that her attacks served legitimate military purposes. The integration of enemy positions with civilian infrastructure demanded precise weapon employment that would achieve tactical objectives without causing unnecessary destruction to non-military targets. On Curry, her radar warning receiver suddenly detected a new threat signature from an unexpected direction, indicating that the mobile air defense system had repositioned itself to achieve optimal firing geometry against her aircraft. The system was apparently utilizing terrain masking and electronic warfare techniques to avoid detection until the moment it chose to engage. Sarah's tactical situation was becoming increasingly complex as multiple threats competed for her attention simultaneously. The thermal signature finally appeared on her targeting display, a faint heat bloom partially concealed beneath camouflage netting that had been specifically designed to reduce infrared detection. The mobile launcher was positioned in a natural depression that provided both concealment and protection from direct attack, demonstrating tactical sophistication that suggested professional military engineering. The target would require precise weapon employment to achieve destruction while avoiding collateral damage to nearby structures. Sarah's targeting solution required her to approach the enemy position from a specific angle that would allow her laser-guided weapon to penetrate the camouflage while maintaining sufficient standoff distance to avoid small arms fire. The attack geometry was complicated by terrain features that limited her maneuvering options and created natural funnels where enemy air defense systems could concentrate their defensive fires. Her final precision-guided weapon was already configured for the engagement, its internal guidance systems programmed with the target coordinates and attack parameters that would maximize the probability of successful target destruction. The weapon represented her last opportunity to neutralize the air defense threat before being forced to rely entirely on cannon fire for subsequent engagements against enemy infantry positions. The tactical clock was running down as fuel considerations and enemy pressure combined to create a rapidly closing window of opportunity for mission success. The moment of ultimate decision arrived as Sarah's radar warning receiver painted the most dangerous tactical picture she had encountered in 6 years of combat operations. The mobile air defense system had achieved a solid radar lock on her aircraft while simultaneously her targeting pod finally identified the concealed launcher through its carefully constructed camouflage. Both she and the enemy were committed to a deadly engagement that would be resolved within the next 30 seconds, with the survivor determining the fate of 12 American Special Operations personnel trapped in the valley below. Her tactical analysis revealed that conventional attack procedures would result in her aircraft's destruction before she could engage the target effectively. The enemy system was positioned to achieve optimal firing solutions regardless of her approach angle, while terrain features limited her maneuvering options to predictable flight paths that the defending forces had obviously anticipated during their defensive planning. Standard close air support doctrine offered no viable solutions for the tactical problem she faced. Sarah made a decision that would have been considered reckless by any objective observer, but represented the kind of calculated risk that defines special operations warfare at its highest levels. Rather than attempting to defeat the air defense system through conventional means, she would use her aircraft's superior speed and maneuverability to overwhelm the enemy's engagement timeline while simultaneously neutralizing multiple threats through coordinated weapon employment. Her plan required her to descend to an altitude that would make her vulnerable to small arms fire, while executing a high-speed attack run that would compress the enemy's decision-making process into a time frame too short for effective defensive response. She would engage the mobile air defense system with her final precision-guided weapon, while simultaneously attacking infantry positions with cannon fire, creating multiple simultaneous threats that would exceed the enemy's ability to coordinate their defensive fires effectively. The Super Hornet responded to her control inputs with mechanical precision as she rolled into a steep diving attack that brought her aircraft through the enemy's engagement envelope at maximum possible speed. Her airspeed indicator climbed past tactical limitations as she traded altitude for velocity, the aircraft's engines producing maximum afterburner thrust that drove her through the thin mountain air faster than the enemy's targeting systems could track and engage effectively. Her laser designator locked onto the mobile launcher's heat signature just as the enemy system fired its surface-to-air missile, creating a deadly race between her precision weapon and the missile climbing toward her aircraft. The timing was so precise that success or failure would be determined by milliseconds and the relative performance characteristics of competing weapon systems designed by different nations for exactly this type of engagement. The GBU-12 laser-guided bomb separated from her aircraft's centerline pylon at the precise moment her targeting computer calculated optimal release parameters. The weapon's internal guidance system immediately acquired the laser energy painting the target and began steering toward the designated impact point through a complex trajectory that accounted for wind conditions, target movement, and gravitational effects on the weapon's flight path. Simultaneously, Sarah activated her aircraft's 20mm cannon system and began engaging the infantry positions that were directly threatening the SEAL team's defensive perimeter. The gun system's computer-controlled targeting calculated the precise aim point required to deliver effective fires against personnel targets, while accounting for her aircraft's high speed and the ballistic characteristics of armor-piercing incendiary ammunition. Her first cannon burst walked across 3 separate fighting positions, the high-velocity rounds tearing through sandbag fortifications and stone walls that had been constructed to provide protection against small arms fire but offered no defense against aircraft cannon systems. Secondary explosions indicated that she had struck stored ammunition or fuel supplies, creating additional casualties among the enemy forces through sympathetic detonation of their own ordnance. The enemy missile was climbing steadily toward an intercept course with her aircraft, its infrared guidance system tracking the heat signature of her engines despite the chaff and flare countermeasures she had deployed during her attack run. Her defensive maneuvering options were severely limited by her low altitude and high speed, factors that had been necessary for mission success but now threatened her aircraft's survival. Her precision weapon impacted the mobile launcher at precisely the moment the enemy missile achieved its closest approach to her aircraft, creating twin explosions that illuminated the entire valley in brilliant white light. The air defense system vanished in a fireball that sent burning debris hundreds of feet into the air, while the missile detonated close enough to her aircraft to cause significant blast damage to her starboard wing and engine nacelle. Warning lights cascaded across her instrument panel as onboard computers assessed the extent of combat damage and began reconfiguring flight control systems to maintain aircraft controllability. Her starboard engine was showing abnormal parameters, with elevated temperatures and reduced thrust output that indicated possible internal damage from missile fragments or blast effects. The fly-by-wire flight control system was automatically compensating for aerodynamic changes caused by wing damage, but her aircraft's performance was noticeably degraded. Despite the battle damage, Sarah continued her attack run against the enemy infantry positions that were maintaining pressure on the SEAL team's defensive perimeter. Her cannon system remained functional, and she had sufficient ammunition remaining to engage multiple targets before being forced to disengage due to fuel limitations or additional combat damage that might compromise her aircraft's ability to return to base safely. Her second cannon run targeted a cluster of fighting positions that had been constructed in a natural rock formation, providing excellent protection against small arms fire, but vulnerable to attack from above. The 20mm rounds shattered the stone barriers and neutralized the enemy personnel, who had been using the position to direct accurate fire against the American ground forces. The elimination of this key position significantly reduced the pressure on the SEAL team's northern flank. The tactical situation was shifting rapidly in favor of the American forces as Sarah's coordinated attack eliminated key enemy positions and disrupted their carefully planned defensive scheme. The remaining enemy fighters were beginning to withdraw from their forward positions, apparently recognizing that continued resistance against close air support would result in their complete destruction without achieving any meaningful tactical objectives. Her fuel consumption during maximum afterburner operations had accelerated the timeline for mission termination, leaving her with perhaps 10 minutes of combat operations before fuel considerations would force her departure, regardless of the tactical situation on the ground. Every subsequent engagement decision had to account for the critical fuel state while maximizing the tactical effects achieved during her remaining time over the target area. The SEAL team was beginning to report decreased enemy pressure as surviving enemy fighters withdrew from their most forward positions to avoid continued air attack. The team medic was able to begin treating wounded personnel who had been unable to receive medical attention during the height of the engagement, improving their chances for successful evacuation once helicopter assets could safely enter the valley. Sarah's third cannon run focused on the enemy command positions that had been coordinating the defensive fires throughout the engagement. Her targeting pod had identified these locations through analysis of radio communications and observed patterns of tactical coordination. The destruction of command elements would further degrade the enemy's ability to mount organized resistance against extraction operations. Her aircraft was handling differently due to the combat damage, requiring constant control inputs to maintain stable flight characteristics. The damaged engine was producing sufficient thrust for continued operations, but its degraded performance would limit her maneuvering options during subsequent engagements. The wing damage was creating additional drag that increased fuel consumption, while reducing her aircraft's overall performance envelope. The enemy's withdrawal was becoming more apparent, as thermal imaging showed fighters abandoning their prepared positions and moving toward predetermined escape routes that would allow them to avoid continued air attack. The tactical situation was transitioning from active combat to battlefield cleanup, as the immediate threat to American forces diminished through sustained air support operations. Her fourth and final cannon run targeted the remaining enemy positions that were still maintaining contact with the SEAL team, using precision bursts to neutralize specific threats, while conserving ammunition for potential defensive purposes during her return flight to base. The elimination of these final resistance pockets would allow ground extraction assets to enter the valley safely and begin immediate casualty evacuation procedures. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The tactical air controller with the SEAL team transmitted the first positive situation report since the engagement began, confirming that enemy pressure had decreased significantly and that extraction preparations could commence immediately. The team was consolidating their casualties and preparing for helicopter evacuation, with medical personnel establishing a landing zone that would allow rapid patient transfer to advanced medical facilities. Sarah's mission was approaching successful completion, despite the unexpected enemy capabilities and the significant combat damage her aircraft had sustained during the engagement. Her innovative tactical approach had overcome a sophisticated enemy defensive scheme through creative application of her aircraft's capabilities and weapon systems. The SEAL team would survive their desperate tactical situation because of her willingness to accept extraordinary personal risk in service of mission accomplishment. Her fuel state was now critical, with warning lights indicating that immediate departure was necessary to ensure sufficient reserves for the return flight to base. The damaged engine was consuming fuel at higher than normal rates, reducing her safety margins and requiring careful flight planning to avoid fuel exhaustion before reaching friendly airspace. The valley below was beginning to show signs of the approaching dawn as the eastern sky lightened with the first hints of sunrise, ending the tactical advantages that darkness had provided to American forces throughout the engagement. The radio transmission that changed everything came through Sarah's headset with crystalline clarity, despite the electronic warfare environment that had plagued communications throughout the engagement. VIPER-1, this is Groundhog 6. All threats neutralized. Repeat, all threats neutralized. Valley is secure for extraction. Outstanding work up there. The SEAL team leader's voice carried a mixture of professional acknowledgement and barely contained awe that spoke volumes about what had just transpired in the narrow Afghan valley below. Sarah's tactical assessment confirmed what the ground forces were reporting through their secure communications network. Her targeting pod's thermal imaging revealed a battlefield that had been transformed from a sophisticated enemy stronghold into a collection of smoking craters and abandoned fighting positions. The coordinated air defense network that had threatened to shoot down her aircraft and massacre the SEAL team had been systematically dismantled through a combination of precision weapons and cannon fire that exceeded anything in standard close air support doctrine. Her aircraft's battle damage was becoming more apparent as adrenaline levels subsided, and she had time to conduct a thorough assessment of her Super Hornet's condition. The starboard engine was operating within acceptable parameters, despite elevated temperatures that indicated possible internal damage from missile fragments. Her right wing showed visible evidence of shrapnel strikes, with several panels displaying the distinctive star-shaped punctures that marked high-velocity impacts from explosive debris. The flight control system was compensating admirably for the aerodynamic changes caused by wing damage, but Sarah could feel subtle differences in her aircraft's handling characteristics that would require careful management during the return flight to base. The fly-by-wire computers were working overtime to maintain stable flight conditions, automatically adjusting control surface positions to counteract the drag and lift variations created by combat damage. Her fuel calculations were showing critical levels that demanded immediate departure from the target area, regardless of any additional tactical requirements that might develop. The extended combat operations at maximum power settings had consumed aviation gasoline at rates that exceeded her mission planning parameters by significant margins. Every additional minute over the target reduced her safety reserves and increased the possibility of fuel exhaustion before reaching friendly territory. The extraction helicopters were already inbound to the valley, their distinctive rotor signatures appearing on her radar display as they approached from the southeast. The MH-60 Blackhawks had been holding in a secure area approximately 20 kilometers away, waiting for the all-clear signal that would allow them to enter the engagement zone safely. Their pilots had been monitoring the tactical frequency throughout the air support mission, fully aware of the desperate situation their special operations colleagues had faced. Sarah established radio contact with the extraction flight leader, providing a comprehensive briefing on the tactical situation and potential threats that might still exist in the surrounding area. Her reconnaissance had identified several possible enemy escape routes that could potentially be used for ambush operations against the helicopters during their extraction phase. The enemy forces that had survived her attacks were likely regrouping in defensive positions outside the immediate target area. Her orbit altitude was optimized to provide overwatch for the extraction operation while conserving fuel for the return journey to Bagram Airfield. The damaged engine was requiring constant monitoring to ensure that operating parameters remained within acceptable limits for continued flight operations. Any significant degradation in engine performance could force an emergency landing at a forward operating base, complicating her own recovery, while potentially compromising operational security for ongoing missions. The first extraction helicopter descended into the valley with textbook precision, its pilot demonstrating the exceptional skill that characterized Special Operations Aviation units. The aircraft flared to a hover just above the landing zone that the SEAL team had prepared, rotor wash creating clouds of dust and debris that temporarily obscured visibility, but provided additional concealment from any remaining enemy observers who might be positioned in the surrounding terrain. Sarah's targeting pod tracked the extraction process with high-resolution imagery that would be invaluable for post-mission intelligence analysis. The SEAL team moved with practiced efficiency despite their casualties and exhaustion, carrying wounded teammates to the helicopter while maintaining security around the landing zone. Their tactical discipline remained exemplary even under the stress of combat operations and the urgency of medical evacuation requirements. The team medic had triaged the casualties according to standard battlefield protocols, with the most seriously wounded operators loaded first to ensure they received advanced medical treatment as quickly as possible. 3 team members required immediate surgical intervention that was only available at major medical facilities, highlighting the critical importance of the air support mission that had enabled their successful extraction from what had appeared to be an hopeless tactical situation. Her weapons systems were now empty except for a small reserve of cannon ammunition that she was retaining for potential defensive purposes during the return flight. The precision-guided bombs had achieved devastating effects against their assigned targets, eliminating sophisticated air defense systems that would have otherwise prevented any possibility of successful extraction. Her cannon employment had been equally effective against personnel targets, breaking up coordinated enemy assaults that were on the verge of overrunning the American defensive positions. The second extraction helicopter landed as the first aircraft departed with its load of wounded personnel, demonstrating the coordination and timing that characterize professional military aviation operations. The remaining SEAL team members moved quickly to the second aircraft, their movements showing the fatigue that inevitably followed extended combat operations, but maintaining the tactical awareness that had kept them alive throughout the engagement. Sarah's electronic warfare systems detected no remaining threats in the immediate area, confirming that her systematic destruction of enemy air defense capabilities had eliminated the most dangerous threats to friendly aircraft operations. The sophisticated integrated defense network that had nearly resulted in catastrophic losses had been reduced to scattered survivors who no longer possessed the equipment or coordination necessary to threaten coalition aviation assets. Her radio crackled with transmissions from the Tactical Operations Center, requesting detailed battle damage assessment information that would be used for intelligence analysis and operational planning. The enemy's capabilities had significantly exceeded pre-mission estimates, suggesting that foreign advisors or professional military personnel had been involved in planning and executing the ambush. This intelligence would be crucial for future operations in the region. The final extraction helicopter departed the valley carrying the remaining SEAL team members, their successful evacuation marking the completion of a mission that had teetered on the edge of disaster for over an hour. Sarah maintained her overwatch position until the helicopters cleared the immediate area, ensuring that no last-minute threats emerged to compromise the extraction operation during its most vulnerable phase. Her departure from the target area was carefully planned to optimize fuel consumption while maintaining sufficient altitude to avoid any remaining ground-based threats. The return flight to Bagram would require precise navigation and fuel management to account for the reduced performance of her damaged engine. Her flight plan included alternate landing sites in case mechanical problems forced an emergency landing before reaching her primary destination. The sunrise was painting the Afghan mountains in brilliant colors as Sarah climbed away from the valley that had nearly become the site of a major tactical defeat for American Special Operations Forces. The natural beauty of the landscape contrasted sharply with the evidence of recent combat, smoke columns marking the locations where sophisticated enemy weapons had been destroyed through innovative application of close air support capabilities. Her aircraft's navigation systems were functioning normally despite the electronic warfare environment that had complicated communications throughout the mission. The inertial navigation system provided precise position information that would guide her return to base, while satellite navigation systems offered backup capability in case primary systems experienced malfunctions during the flight home. The Tactical Air Control Party had transmitted preliminary casualty reports indicating that all 12 SEAL team members had survived the engagement, though several required extensive medical treatment for wounds sustained during the prolonged firefight. The successful extraction of the entire team represented a significant tactical victory that had been achieved through close coordination between ground and air assets operating under extremely challenging conditions. Sarah's mission report would document tactical innovations that exceeded standard operating procedures, potentially influencing future doctrine development for close air support operations in complex threat environments. Her single aircraft engagement of multiple sophisticated air defense systems while simultaneously providing fire support to ground forces represented a level of tactical excellence that would be studied at military educational institutions for years to come. Her fuel quantity indicators were showing levels that would require careful flight management to ensure safe arrival at Bagram Airfield, but the damaged engine was continuing to operate within acceptable parameters that would allow normal landing procedures. The successful completion of both the tactical mission and the safe recovery of her aircraft would mark this operation as one of the most successful close air support missions of the entire Afghan conflict. The radio frequencies were already carrying news of the successful extraction, with various command elements requesting detailed briefings on the tactical situation and lessons learned during the engagement. Sarah's innovative tactical approach had prevented what could have been a significant loss of American Special Operations personnel, while simultaneously eliminating a sophisticated enemy defensive network that posed threats to future coalition operations in the region. Her hands remained steady on the controls as she guided her battle-damaged aircraft toward home base, the adrenaline of combat gradually giving way to the professional satisfaction that came from mission accomplishment under extraordinary circumstances. The approach to Bagram Airfield unfolded with mechanical precision despite the battle damage that had transformed Sarah's Super Hornet from a pristine combat aircraft into a wounded warrior limping home from the fight. The control tower had been notified of her condition through coded transmissions that indicated potential emergency landing requirements, prompting ground crews to position firefighting equipment along the runway as a precautionary measure against the possibility of mechanical failure during the landing sequence. Her damaged starboard engine was maintaining stable operation but showing signs of degraded performance that required constant monitoring through her engine management systems. The internal temperatures remained elevated beyond normal operating parameters, indicating that missile fragments had likely penetrated the engine casing and damaged internal components. Despite these concerning indicators, the power plant was producing sufficient thrust to maintain controlled flight and execute a normal landing approach. The wing damage was more visually dramatic than functionally critical, with multiple shrapnel punctures creating a distinctive pattern across the upper surface of her starboard wing. The aircraft's structural integrity remained sound, but the aerodynamic disruption caused by the holes was creating additional drag that increased fuel consumption while reducing overall flight performance. Her fly-by-wire flight control system continued compensating for these changes automatically. Sarah's fuel quantity was approaching minimum levels that would have triggered emergency procedures under normal circumstances, but her precise flight management had conserved enough aviation gasoline to complete the landing with acceptable reserves. The fuel consumption calculations showed that she had perhaps 10 minutes of flight time remaining, sufficient for a single approach attempt, but leaving no margin for a missed approach or extended traffic pattern operations. The airfield's approach controllers vectored her directly to the runway without the usual traffic pattern procedures that would have required additional fuel consumption during extended maneuvering. Her aircraft's emergency status granted priority handling that expedited her arrival, while ensuring that emergency response equipment was positioned appropriately for any contingencies that might develop during the landing phase. Her pre-landing checklist proceeded normally despite the combat damage, with all primary flight systems responding appropriately to her control inputs. The landing gear extended without difficulty, the hydraulic systems having escaped damage during the missile engagement that had claimed portions of her wing and engine. Her approach speed was slightly higher than normal to account for the aerodynamic changes caused by battle damage, but well within acceptable parameters for safe landing operations. The runway appeared ahead through her heads-up display, a familiar sight that marked the end of another combat mission in a deployment that had already seen more action than most pilots experienced in entire careers. Sarah's approach was stable and controlled, her hands making minute corrections to maintain the precise glide path that would bring her aircraft safely to the ground despite its wounded condition. Her touchdown was smooth and professional, the main landing gear making contact with the runway surface at precisely the calculated point that would allow optimal use of the available stopping distance. The aircraft's weight settled onto the landing gear as aerodynamic lift decreased, and she deployed her speed brakes while applying wheel brakes to decelerate the Super Hornet to taxi speed. The emergency vehicles followed her aircraft as she taxied toward her assigned parking spot, their crews prepared to respond immediately if any signs of fire or mechanical failure became apparent during ground operations. Sarah's engine parameters remained stable throughout the taxi phase, suggesting that the damage, while significant, had not compromised the power plant's ability to operate safely during ground operations. Her crew chief was waiting at the aircraft parking spot with a concerned expression that reflected his awareness of the combat damage his aircraft had sustained during the mission. The relationship between pilot and crew chief was built on mutual trust and professional respect, with each understanding their role in maintaining the aircraft's combat readiness. His immediate visual inspection would determine the extent of repairs required before the aircraft could return to operational status. Sarah completed her post-flight checklist with the same methodical attention to detail that characterized all her procedures, ensuring that aircraft systems were properly configured for ground operations and maintenance activities. Her engine shutdown was normal despite the battle damage, with both power plants spooling down smoothly as she secured fuel flow and electrical systems according to established procedures. The canopy opened with its characteristic hydraulic whine, allowing the Afghan morning air to flow into the cockpit and dissipate the accumulated heat from extended combat operations. Sarah remained in her ejection seat for several moments, conducting a mental review of the mission while her body processed the physical and emotional stress that inevitably followed intense combat operations. Her crew chief's preliminary inspection revealed the full extent of the battle damage that her aircraft had sustained during the missile engagement. Multiple shrapnel holes punctured the starboard wing, while the engine showed evidence of foreign object damage that would require detailed inspection by maintenance specialists. Despite this damage, the aircraft had continued to perform its mission and brought her safely home, testament to the robust design of modern military aviation systems. The intelligence debriefing would begin within hours, with specialists eager to document the enemy capabilities that had exceeded pre-mission estimates and analyze the tactical innovations that had enabled mission success despite overwhelming odds. Sarah's engagement of multiple air defense systems, while simultaneously providing close air support, represented tactical achievements that would influence future doctrine development and training programs. Her flight suit was soaked with perspiration despite the morning coolness, physical evidence of the stress and exertion that characterized high-intensity combat operations. The adrenaline that had sustained her throughout the mission was beginning to dissipate, leaving behind the familiar exhaustion that followed extended periods of maximum alertness and physical performance under life-threatening conditions. The maintenance hangar was already being prepared for the extensive repairs that would be required to return her aircraft to fully operational status. Replacement parts were being located through supply channels, while technical specialists analyzed the damage to develop comprehensive repair procedures that would restore the Super Hornet's combat capability within acceptable timeframes. Her weapons systems had performed flawlessly throughout the engagement, with precision-guided munitions achieving devastating effects against their assigned targets, while the cannon system provided accurate fire support that eliminated multiple enemy positions. The integration of these weapons with her aircraft's targeting systems had enabled tactical flexibility that proved crucial to mission success. The SEAL team's successful extraction had been confirmed through secure communications, with all personnel now receiving appropriate medical treatment at advanced facilities equipped to handle combat injuries. The mission's success was measured not only in tactical objectives achieved, but in American lives, preserved through exceptional coordination between ground and air assets operating under extreme conditions. Sarah's personal equipment was functioning normally despite the combat stress it had endured during the mission. Her helmet's heads-up display had provided critical flight information throughout the engagement, while her survival gear remained ready for use in case mechanical problems had forced ejection over hostile territory. The redundant safety systems had performed their intended functions without compromise. Her post-mission routine included detailed documentation of aircraft systems performance, enemy capabilities encountered, and tactical procedures employed during the engagement. This information would contribute to the institutional knowledge base that guided training programs and doctrine development for future combat operations. Every mission provided learning opportunities that enhanced overall organizational capability. The Base Operations Center was already processing preliminary mission reports that documented the successful extraction and elimination of significant enemy capabilities in the target area. The intelligence value of the operation extended beyond the immediate tactical success to include insights into enemy organizational structures and operational capabilities that would inform future mission planning activities. Her aircraft's flight data recorder had captured detailed information about system performance throughout the combat mission, data that would be analyzed by engineers to assess the effectiveness of current aircraft designs and identify potential improvements for future variants. The real-world combat data was invaluable for validation of theoretical performance models and design specifications. The squadron commander would conduct a detailed mission debrief that examined every aspect of the operation, from initial planning through final execution and recovery. These professional discussions were essential for identifying lessons learned and sharing tactical innovations with other pilots who might face similar challenges during their own combat missions. Sarah's maintenance logbook required extensive entries documenting the combat damage and its effects on aircraft performance, information that would guide repair priorities and influence future maintenance procedures. The interaction between combat damage and system performance provided valuable data for improving aircraft survivability in hostile environments. Her personal gear was secured according to standard procedures, with sensitive equipment requiring special handling to prevent compromise of classified capabilities or techniques. The operational security measures that protected American tactical advantages were as important as the combat missions themselves, ensuring that hard-won capabilities remained effective against adaptive enemies. The debriefing schedule would consume most of her remaining day, with various specialists requesting detailed information about different aspects of the mission. Her observations and decisions would be analyzed to extract maximum learning value from the combat experience, contributing to the continuous improvement process that characterized professional military organizations. The mission's success would be documented in official records that became part of the historical account of American military operations in Afghanistan, preserving the tactical innovations and professional excellence that had prevented a potential disaster while achieving significant operational objectives against a sophisticated and well-prepared enemy force. The mess hall at Bagram Airfield buzzed with the routine conversations of military personnel beginning another day in Afghanistan, unaware that 12 American Special Operations soldiers were alive because of decisions made in a cockpit 30,000 feet above their breakfast conversations. Sarah sat alone at a corner table, mechanically consuming coffee that had long since grown cold while her mind processed the events that had unfolded in the pre-dawn darkness of a remote valley that most of these people would never see on a map. Her hands remained steady as she lifted the ceramic mug, no tremor betraying the life-and-death decisions she had made just hours earlier. The other personnel in the dining facility moved through their morning routines with the casual efficiency of people whose greatest concern was whether the scrambled eggs were properly cooked or if the coffee would last until the next resupply flight. None of them knew that their peaceful breakfast was possible because sophisticated enemy air defense systems had been systematically destroyed by a single pilot operating far beyond the boundaries of conventional tactical doctrine. The intelligence briefing she had attended an hour earlier painted a picture of enemy capabilities that had exceeded every estimate in their pre-mission analysis. The Taliban forces in that valley had been reinforced with foreign advisors, professional military equipment, and a sophisticated understanding of American special operations procedures that suggested months of preparation and intelligence gathering. The ambush had been designed specifically to eliminate an entire SEAL team and any aircraft that attempted to provide support, a tactical trap that should have succeeded according to every conventional military analysis. Her aircraft's battle damage assessment had revealed the full extent of the punishment her Super Hornet had absorbed during the engagement. 17 separate puncture wounds in the starboard wing, engine damage that would require complete power plant replacement, and stress fractures in the airframe that spoke to the violence of her defensive maneuvering under fire. The maintenance chief had shaken his head while reviewing the damage report, commenting that most pilots would have been forced to eject rather than continuing combat operations with such extensive battle damage. The SEAL team's medical report had arrived through secure channels just after dawn, confirming that all 12 operators had survived their ordeal, despite sustaining casualties that would have been fatal without immediate medical evacuation. 3 team members required surgical intervention for wounds that had come perilously close to severing major arteries, while others suffered from shrapnel injuries and blast effects that would require extended recovery periods. Their survival was directly attributable to the air support that had broken the enemy's coordinated assault just as their defensive perimeter was about to collapse. Sarah's mission report had been classified at the highest levels, its tactical innovations and enemy capability assessments deemed too sensitive for routine distribution. The techniques she had employed to engage multiple air defense systems simultaneously while providing close air support exceeded standard doctrine by such significant margins that senior commanders were still debating whether her actions represented brilliant tactical innovation or reckless endangerment of valuable assets. The successful outcome had validated her decisions, but the risks she had accepted would have been career-ending if the mission had failed. Her squadron commander had privately acknowledged that her performance during the engagement represented the highest levels of tactical excellence, but he had also expressed concern about the precedent it might set for other pilots who lacked her experience and judgment. The balance between tactical innovation and acceptable risk was always delicate in combat operations, particularly when individual decisions could affect the lives of ground personnel who depended on air support for their survival. The maintenance hangar where her aircraft awaited repairs had become an unofficial pilgrimage site for other pilots and ground crew members who wanted to see the battle damage that told the story of an extraordinary combat mission. The pattern of shrapnel holes and the twisted metal around the engine intake provided physical evidence of the violence she had endured while completing her mission. Several pilots had asked detailed questions about her tactical decision-making, seeking to understand how she had achieved success against such overwhelming odds. Her post-mission interviews with intelligence specialists had revealed the sophisticated nature of the enemy force she had engaged. The air defense systems were modern designs that had been smuggled into Afghanistan through complex supply networks that involved multiple countries and organizations. The tactical coordination demonstrated by the enemy fighters suggested professional military training that exceeded anything typically encountered during counterinsurgency operations. Her systematic destruction of these capabilities had eliminated threats that could have affected coalition operations throughout the region. The psychological impact of extended combat operations was beginning to manifest itself through subtle changes in her daily routine and interactions with other personnel. Sarah found herself unconsciously scanning overhead for aircraft whenever she walked between buildings, her combat-trained reflexes still primed for threats that no longer existed in the secure environment of Bagram Airfield. These responses were normal and temporary, but they served as reminders of the intense stress she had experienced during the mission. Her equipment inspection had revealed no failures or malfunctions in any of the systems that had been critical to mission success. Her helmet's heads-up display, survival gear, weapons targeting systems, and communication equipment had all performed flawlessly under the extreme conditions of combat operations. The reliability of these systems had enabled her to focus entirely on tactical decision-making without being distracted by equipment concerns that might have compromised mission effectiveness. The encrypted message from the SEAL team leader had been delivered through official channels, but its personal tone conveyed emotions that transcended military protocol. His acknowledgement of her role in their survival was measured in language appropriate for official communications, but the underlying gratitude was unmistakable. 12 American Special Operations personnel would return to their families because of her willingness to accept extraordinary personal risk in service of mission accomplishment. Her replacement aircraft was already being prepared for her next scheduled mission, a routine combat air patrol that would seem almost mundane compared to the tactical challenges she had faced in the Valley engagement. The maintenance crews were conducting their pre-flight inspections with their usual thoroughness, ensuring that every system met the exacting standards required for combat operations. Their professional competence provided the foundation that enabled pilots to focus on tactical execution rather than mechanical concerns. The regional intelligence assessment had been updated to reflect the enemy capabilities that had been revealed during her mission, information that would influence future operational planning throughout Afghanistan. The sophisticated air defense network she had encountered was not an isolated threat, but part of a broader enemy effort to develop countermeasures against American tactical aviation. Her successful engagement had provided valuable insights into enemy capabilities, while demonstrating effective countermeasures that could be employed by other pilots. Her personal correspondence with family members would not mention the details of her recent mission, operational security requirements preventing her from sharing information that might compromise future operations or reveal classified capabilities to potential enemies. The letters she wrote home described routine activities and general observations about life in Afghanistan, maintaining the fiction that her deployment involved mostly administrative duties and occasional training flights. The base chaplain had made himself available for confidential counseling sessions, recognizing that combat operations could create spiritual and emotional challenges that required professional support. Sarah had declined his offer, preferring to process her experiences through the disciplined mental frameworks that her military training had provided. Her ability to compartmentalize combat stress while maintaining operational effectiveness was a crucial skill that had been developed through years of preparation and experience. Her flight schedule for the remainder of the deployment included a mixture of combat air patrol missions, training exercises, and maintenance test flights that would keep her actively engaged in operations while allowing time for the emotional processing that inevitably followed intense combat experiences. The variety of missions would provide opportunities to apply lessons learned during the Valley engagement while maintaining the tactical proficiency that was essential for continued effectiveness in combat operations. The awards and recognition process had already begun, with various levels of command reviewing her actions for potential decoration. The complexity of the mission, the tactical innovation demonstrated, and the successful outcome despite overwhelming odds, suggested that significant recognition was appropriate. However, the classified nature of many aspects of the operation would limit the public acknowledgement that could be provided without compromising operational security. Her aircraft's flight data had been analyzed by engineers at multiple levels, providing detailed information about system performance under extreme combat conditions. The data would contribute to ongoing research and development efforts aimed at improving aircraft survivability and combat effectiveness. Her mission had provided real-world validation of design specifications while identifying areas where future improvements might enhance operational capabilities. The mess hall had gradually emptied as personnel departed for their various duties, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the cold coffee that had become a prop in her unconscious effort to maintain normal routines. Her internal clock was still synchronized to the rhythm of combat operations, her body remaining alert for threats that no longer existed in the secure environment of the airbase. The maintenance report on her damaged aircraft indicated that repairs would require several weeks and the installation of major components that were not readily available in theater. Her Super Hornet would eventually return to operational status, but the extensive damage served as a permanent reminder of the violence she had endured while completing her mission. The aircraft's survival, like her own, was testament to the robust engineering that enabled continued operation, despite catastrophic damage. Her tactical innovation during the mission had already begun influencing training scenarios at advanced pilot schools, where instructors were developing exercises that would prepare future aviators for similar challenges. The lessons learned during her Valley engagement would be preserved in institutional knowledge that would benefit pilots who had not yet been born when she made her split-second decisions under fire. The Secure Communications Facility had processed her detailed mission report, transmitting the classified information through channels that would ensure it reached decision-makers at the highest levels of military command. Her tactical assessment and recommendations would influence future doctrine development and operational planning, contributing to the continuous evolution of military capabilities in response to emerging threats. Her personal equipment required routine maintenance and inspection following its exposure to combat conditions, ensuring that it would remain reliable during future missions. The survival gear, communication systems, and protective equipment that had enabled her to complete the mission safely would be serviced according to strict technical standards that left no margin for failure during subsequent operations. The relationship between air and ground forces had been strengthened by the successful coordination demonstrated during the Valley engagement, with special operations personnel expressing increased confidence in close air support capabilities. This trust was built through successful missions that demonstrated the effectiveness of integrated operations, creating professional bonds that enhanced combat effectiveness across all elements of the military team. Her contribution to the broader war effort extended beyond the immediate tactical success to include the intelligence gathered, enemy capabilities destroyed, and operational lessons learned during the engagement. The mission's impact would be measured not only in American lives saved, but in the enhanced capabilities that would benefit future operations throughout the region and beyond. The quiet professionalism that characterized her approach to military service had been demonstrated at the highest levels during her Valley engagement, setting an example of tactical excellence and personal courage that would inspire other pilots throughout their careers. Her actions represented the finest traditions of military aviation, proving that individual competence and determination could overcome seemingly impossible odds when applied with precision and unwavering commitment to mission success. Sarah finished her cold coffee and prepared to begin another day of routine activities that would help process the extraordinary events she had experienced, knowing that somewhere in the world, 12 American Special Operations personnel were alive because she had chosen to push beyond the boundaries of conventional tactics when their lives hung in the balance. 3 months later, Sarah Chen stood in the Pentagon briefing room facing a collection of stars and eagles that represented the highest levels of military leadership. The PowerPoint slide behind her showed a tactical diagram of the Valley engagement, but the sterile lines and symbols could never capture the split-second decisions that had saved 12 lives in the pre-dawn darkness of Afghanistan. Whole lives. Captain Chen's tactical innovation represents a paradigm shift in close air support doctrine, the briefing officer was explaining to the assembled generals and admirals. Her simultaneous engagement of multiple air defense systems while providing direct fire support exceeded all established parameters for single aircraft operations. Sarah maintained her military bearing as the discussion continued around her, but her mind drifted to a different briefing room where she had met the SEAL team just weeks earlier. Master Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez had stood up when she entered, his weathered face breaking into an uncharacteristic smile. "Ma'am, I've been in this business for 22 years, and I've never seen anything like what you pulled off in that valley." The team medic had been more direct. "3 of my guys are going home to their families because you decided to do something that probably should have gotten you court-martialed." He paused, then added quietly, "Thank you." Now, standing before the military's senior leadership, Sarah realized that her story was already becoming legend within the special operations community. Young pilots at Pensacola were studying her tactical decisions. Flight instructors at Fallon were incorporating her techniques into advanced training scenarios. Her innovation born from desperation was becoming doctrine. But what struck her most profoundly was a letter she had received the previous week. It was written in a child's handwriting on school notebook paper. "Dear Captain Chen, my daddy says you saved his life in Afghanistan. He was one of the soldiers on the ground. Thank you for bringing my daddy home. Love, Emma Rodriguez, age 7. The Pentagon briefing concluded with discussions of medals and promotions, recognition that Sarah accepted with the same quiet professionalism that had characterized her entire career. But the real measure of her success wasn't in the brass and ribbons that would be added to her uniform. It was in birthday parties that would be celebrated, graduations that would be attended, and bedtime stories that would be read because 12 American warriors had lived to see another sunrise. As she walked through the corridors of the Pentagon, Sarah passed a wall displaying photographs of Medal of Honor recipients throughout American history. Their faces told stories of extraordinary courage in impossible circumstances, individuals who had risen above themselves when others depended on their actions. She understood now that she was part of that continuum, connected to every person who had ever chosen service above self when the stakes couldn't be higher. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her squadron commander. "CNN wants an interview about the Valley mission. Thoughts?" Sarah deleted the message without responding. Some stories didn't need to be told publicly. The people who mattered already knew. Heroes don't always wear capes or seek spotlights. Sometimes they wear flight suits and make split-second decisions that save lives while the world sleeps peacefully below. Sometimes heroism looks like a quiet professional doing an impossible job, with no fanfare, no recognition, just the satisfaction of bringing everyone home. In a world that often celebrates the loudest voices, take a moment to appreciate the quiet guardians who stand watch in the darkness. They're out there right now, in cockpits, on patrol, standing post, ensuring that tomorrow arrives safely for the rest of us. What quiet heroes have you encountered in your own life? Share their stories in the comments below and subscribe for more tales of courage that happen when no one's watching but everyone's depending on it.